Numbers chapter 26 and 27. Numbers 26 and 27. And it came to pass after the plague that the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest, saying, Take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward, throughout their father's house, all that are able to go to war in Israel. And Moses and Eleazar the priest spake with them in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, Take the sum of the people from 20 years old and upward, as the Lord commanded Moses and the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt. Reuben, the eldest son of Israel, the children of Reuben, Hanok, of whom cometh the family of the Hanokites, of Palu, the family of the Pulites, of Hezron, the family of the Hezronites, of Carmi, the family of the Carmites. These are the families of the Reubenites, and they that were numbered of them were 43,730. And the sons of Palu, Eliab, and the sons of Eliab, Nemuel, and Dathan, and Abiram. This is at Dathan and Abiram, which were famous in the congregation, who strove against Moses and against Aaron in the company of Korah, when they strove against the Lord. And the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed them up, together with Korah, when that company died, what time the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a sign. Notwithstanding, the children of Korah died not. The sons of Simeon, after the families of Nemuel, the family of the Nemulites, of Jamin, the family of the Jaminites, of Jachin, the family of the Jachinites, of Zerah, the family of the Zarhites, of Shaul, the family of the Shualites. These are the families of the Simeonites, 22,200. The children of Gad, after their families, of Zephon, the family of the Zephonites, of Haggai, the family of the Haggites, of Shunai, the family of the Shunites, of Ozni, the family of the Oznites, of Eri, the family of the Erites, of Arad, the family of the Aradites, of Arieli, the family of the Arielites. These are the families of the children of Gad, according to those that were numbered of them, 40,500. The sons of Judah were Ur and Onan, and Ur and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Judah, after their families, were of Shelah, the family of the Shelonites, of Pharez, the family of the Pharezites, of Zerah, the family of the Zarhites. And the sons of Pharez were of Hezron, the family of the Hezronites, of Hamuel, the family of the Hamulites. These are the families of Judah, according to those that were numbered of them, 316,500. Of the sons of Issachar, after their families, of Tola, the family of the Tolites, of Pua, the family of the Punites, of Jashuba, the family of the Jashubites, of Shimron, the family of the Shimronites. These are the families of Issachar, according to those that were numbered of them, 304,300. Of the sons of Zebulun, after their families, of Sered, the family of the Sardites, of Elon, the family of the Elonites, of Jaleel, the family of the Jelites. These are the families of the Zebulunites, according to those that were numbered of them, 300,500. The sons of Joseph, after their families, were Manasseh and Ephraim. Of the sons of Manasseh, of Machir, the family of the Machirites, and Machir begat Gilead. Of Gilead come the family of the Gileadites. These are the sons of Gilead, of Jezer, the family of the Jezerites, of Helek, the family of the Helekites, of Azriel, the family of the Azrielites, and of Shechem, the family of the Shechemites, and of Shemida, the family of the Shemaites, and of Epher, the family of the Epherites. And Zephlahad, the son of Hepher, had no sons, but daughters. And the names of the daughters of Zephlahad were Mahala, and Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. These are the families of Manasseh, and those that were numbered of them, 52,700. These are the sons of Ephraim, after their families, of Shulahah, the family of the Shuphahites, of Becher, the family of the Bacharites, of Tahan, the family of the Tahanites. And these are the sons of Shulah of Iran, the family of the Iranites. These are the families of the sons of Ephraim, according to those that were numbered of them, 32,500. These are the sons of Joseph after their families. The sons of Benjamin after their families, of Bela, the family of the Belites, of Ashbel, the family of the Ashbelites, of Ahiram, the family of the Hirites, of Shuphem, the family of the Shuphamites, of Hupham, the family of the Huphamites. And the sons of Bela were Ard and Naaman. Of Ard, the family of the Ardites, and Naaman, the family of the Naamites. These are the sons of Benjamin after their families, and they that were numbered of them were 45,600. These are the sons of Dan after their families, of Shuham, the family of the Shuhamites. These are the families of Dan after their families. All the families of the Shuhamites, according to those that were numbered of them, were 64,400. Of the children of Asher after their families, of Jimnah, the family of the Jimnites, of Jeshua, the family of the Jeshuites, of Burah, the family of the Burites, of the sons of Burah, of Heber, the family of the Heberites, of Machil, the family of the Machilites, and the name of the daughter of Asher was Sarah. These are the families of the sons of Asher, according to those that were numbered of them, who were 53,400. Of the sons of Naphtali, after their families, of Jaziel, the family of the Jezelites, of Gunai, the family of the Gunites, of Jezer, the family of the Jezerites, of Shelam, the family of the Shelamites. These are the families of Naphtali, according to their families, and they that were numbered of them were 45,400. These are the numbered of the children of Israel, 600,000 and 1,730. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Unto these the land shall be divided for an inheritance according to the number of names. To many thou shalt give to more inheritance, and to few thou shalt give the less inheritance. To every one shall his inheritance be given, according to those that were numbered of him. Notwithstanding, the land shall be divided by lot. According to the names of the tribes of their fathers, they shall inherit. According to the lot shall the possession thereof be divided between many and few. And these are they that were numbered, the Levites, after their families, of Gershon, the family of Gershonites, of Kohath, the family of the Kohathites, of Merari, the family of the Marites. These are the families of the Levites, the family of the Libnites, the family of the Hebronites, the family of the Malites, the family of the Mushites, the family of the Kohathites, and Kohath begat Amram. And the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, whom her father bare to Levi in Egypt. And she bare unto Amram Aaron and Moses, and Miriam their sister. And unto Aaron was born Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. And Nadab and Abihu died when they offered strange fire before the Lord. And those that were numbered of them were 23,000, all males from a month old and upward. For they were not numbered among the children of Israel, because there was no inheritance given them among the children of Israel. These are they that were numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who numbered the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho. But among these there was not a man of them whom Moses and Aaron the priests numbered, when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said of them, They shall surely die in the wilderness. And there was not left a man of them, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua the son of Nun. Then came the daughters of Zephlahad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, and Hoglah, and Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest, and before the princes and all the congregation by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, and he was not in the company of them that gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died in his own sin, and had no sons. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family, because he had no son? Give unto us therefore a possession among the brethren of our father. And Moses brought their cause before the Lord. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, The daughter of Zephlahad speak right. Thou shalt surely give them a possession for an inheritance among their father's brethren, and thou shalt cause the inheritance of their father to pass unto them. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a man die and have no son, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. And if he have no daughter, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his brethren. And if he have no brethren, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his father's brethren. And if his father have no brethren, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his kinsman that is next to him of his family. And he shall possess it. And it shall be unto the children of Israel a statute of judgment, as the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord said unto Moses, Get thee up into this mountain Abiram, and see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And when thou hast seen it, thou also shalt be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother was gathered. For you rebelled against my commandment in the desert of Zin, in the strife of the congregation, to sanctify me at the water before their eyes, that is the water of Meribah, in Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin. And Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in. That the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take thee Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him, after the judgment of Urim, before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and he took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation. And he laid his hands upon him, and gave him a charge, as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your word, Lord, and that we can read it, Lord, and that we have the freedom to do so, Lord. And Lord, that freedom is being challenged every day as the devil's at work and to take it away because he doesn't like Christians to have the Bible, Lord. And I pray that we would not take it for granted, Lord, that we have the freedom to do that, Lord. And I think a lot of times we only do it when it's gone and when it's disappeared. But Lord, I pray that we soak up the word when it's available, Lord. And Lord, we know that persecution brings a lot of bad things in our lives, but Lord, we know it's all for good. And Lord, I pray that you just bless our pastor today as he preaches, Lord. Fill him with your spirit, Lord. Help him not to stutter or trip over his words, Lord, that you just give him clarity of speech. And I just pray you bless the rest of our day, Lord. Help us to think of you and meditate upon your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Daniel. All right, today's message is counted in the new generation. Counted in the new generation. We're not of the old generation. We as Christians in particular are part of that new generation, the generation of Jesus Christ. We are those that will eventually enter into the promised kingdom, the promised land, the promised service of the Lord, and many different things. And depending on what we do here and now will depend on what we receive in the future. What God has given. If you've been faithful with a few things, God will give you inheritance with many things. Will give you many things. Here in this passage, we see, of course, that he says in in chapter 26. In chapter 26, verse 53, Unto these the land shall be divided for an inheritance, according to the number of names. To many shalt thou give the more inheritance, and to few thou shalt give the less inheritance. To every one shall his inheritance be given, according to the land, to those that were numbered of him. So, in other words, depending on how many you have, is how much land you're going to get. If you had a bunch of kids, you got a lot of land. If you had a few kids, you only got a little bit of land. And so depending on what that was, you would get it. But then the land was, of course, by lot and different things. So somebody couldn't try to steal the better land for themselves or whatever. It was just by lot. In other words, when somebody threw a lot in the Bible, they didn't believe it was by chance, but rather they believed it was by the sovereignty of God, by the determinate counsel of God. That hey, if there was like 30 plots of land and you wanted 31, but God wanted you to have 32, then you would get 32. And so that's how they believed the lot worked. Was not a random happen chance, but rather That was by divine providence of the Lord. And so, according to the lot shall the possession be divided between many and few. And so in this generation, this new generation, they were primarily focused on receiving of land, receiving of an inheritance, receiving of a place to have. And so the receiving was dependent on whether they had many or whether they had few. And it was also primarily in verse 2, according to verse 2, it was to all that are able to go to war in Israel. In other words, if you, as an individual, were ready and prepared, you took sword class, you took you did all your combat classes, Krav Maga or whatever. I don't know. That's not a Krav Maga stance, I don't think. But so you took your battle, positions. If you were of Dan and left-handed or whatever, you had the ability of the bow or the sling or whatever, you perfected your craft to where you are now prepared and ready to go out and to battle. So this new generation, the generation of Jesus Christ, the lots, the inheritance, if you will, in the new kingdom, will be determined by your ability to go out to battle. And so what do Christians who are born into this new generation by the quickening Spirit of Jesus Christ, what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to be prepared to go to war, to buy and sell and get gain. Now obviously we don't battle and slaughter people physically and all this stuff, but we fight against principalities and powers of darkness and so forth. And so we have to have our feet shod with the gospel, and we have to have the breastplate of righteousness and all the armor that we needed, and the sword of the word of the Lord, and the shield of faith, and the helmet of salvation, and so forth. And all those pieces to working together, prepared to battle. And so when we're prepared to battle, that's why when we're new Christian, we should be focused on learning how to become a strong Christian. You start as a little plant, little leaves pop out, and you start to grow forth. You realize, hey, in my life, in my physical body, in my environment, there's a lot of rocks, there's a lot of weeds. I need to get rid of those so that I can be nourished by the Lord when He waters the ground. When I'm planted and then when I'm watered, and then I need to make sure my ground, the physical life that I'm in, is clear of weeds and clear of rocks, and that it's not, be able to receive that good seed. And then in order to inherit a land, a property or an inheritance in the coming kingdom, what I need to do is be able to bring forth fruit. I need to be able to be prosperous. I need to be able to take what I've been given as a seed, grow up prepared, and then as a seed have seeds for the Lord to cast forth for more seeds and so forth. And so however much I get, 10, 20, 30, to 100-fold, however much I get or give is dependent on how big of a crop I am, right? So if I am one seed and I fall in the stony grounds and stuff, and I just end up bringing forth a bushel of 10 or whatever, and then those seeds fall around me, what happens? It just kind of very slow. But then there will be some good ground that's all prepared, it's ready to go, and then the seeds fall 100-fold from my sheaths, if you will, and they fall into the ground, and then those seeds in good ground go up, and then they propagate much easier. If you've studied plants that are invasive, if you will, that take over other plants, or other cultures, other things, if you study them out, they're self-propagating. They're perpetually widening their borders and so forth. And so, and in the process of doing so, that they grow up in large, healthy plants, and then they seed, and then those seeds fall to the ground, and then they go through the process, and they grow to a larger area. And so eventually the person says, oh, these are noxious plants, these are invasive species, we don't want this here. And they start persecuting that, trying to shrink it down, right? And so that's how the devil, they cast bad seed in there so that the good seed wouldn't grow properly and so forth. And so that same general idea that we understand from plants is kind of how we have been taught by Christ, is how that we should have our life. Our physical body is like the dirt, and our physical life is like the dirt. We need to prepare our ground so that when the seed we have is fruiting, that it has a place to prosper and go. And so that shows how that a righteous life can be more successful than a Christian who is in bad, stoning, busy doing all the other things, filled with persecutions and stuff and having fear, they're not prepared, so they won't prosper. So they'll have a little inheritance, whereas somebody who is prospering and had made their physical land bountiful and ready for the harvest, and broke up that fallow ground, got rid of the weeds, got rid of the stones, and stayed away from the road, the barren road, and then you're able to have a greater harvest that way, and they're prepared, and so they'll have a greater inheritance in eternity. And so this same picture is shown here in the census, in the picture here. And we're not going to go through all the people here and all the percentages, but there is, in the old generation, there was a certain amount of people counted in Numbers chapter 1, and you can see that number, and you can study those numbers and so forth. And the new generation, some of those tribes got greater numbers, and so because of the time in the wilderness and the time of persecution, whereas if they went in the first time, they wouldn't have gotten a big inheritance. But because they prospered and used that time that God gave into them to grow their tribe, they were able to go in this 40 years later and receive a bigger inheritance. So even in the time of persecution, even the time of how some people would kind of characterize the age as the Laodicean age where nobody's doing good, and then instead of doing what's right and so forth, and you're prospering in a time that's supposedly filled with persecution and nobody's prospering, but you do greater, then you're going to receive a greater inheritance in spite of the persecution. But then there are other tribes that use the wilderness time as an excuse to just kind of, God has forsaken us, God has left us, and so we're not going to do anything for the Lord. They all are part of that old generation. They fall and die in the ground. So there are certain tribes that, for example, Simeon in the first count was 59,300. In the second count, they were from 59,300 men prepared for battle to, in the second count 40 years later, to 22,000 men, a loss of 37,100 men, a loss of 63%. When persecution came, rather than it being a blessing to them, they caused them to lose more faith. They weren't tried. The trials of life can either that make the potato soft, hardens the egg, that type of thing. Is that the old generation in the wilderness allowed that persecution to cause them to lose ground, to cause them to be over half what they used to be. But others, for example, take a look at Manasseh, and Manasseh, where Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, had no sons but the daughters. His tribe, in the first they were 32,200, and the second 52,700, which was a gain of 20,500, a gain of 64%. So in that tribe, especially that tribe that was with the ladies that had their father had no sons, and so they're like, oh, we're not going to get inheritance, but we've been training and teaching these people how to raise their kids and do right. Remember, because they had some rules they had to follow and to teach the new generation to have joy and to sacrifice properly and teach them all the laws and the rules to have faith and all those things. They were doing what was right, and therefore they prospered in receiving more people into their tribe. But here's some people, he and his family had taught them to live right, and he had 5 daughters. He's been trying to have a son to take over, but no son took over. And why? Because he was doing right in the time of wilderness. Why should he be punished because he was trying to do right, and yet why should he be punished for that? And so that was in the next chapter, that was their case, is why should he be punished, his inheritance taken away, because he didn't have a son? Because the 5 daughters that he did have, he raised to be righteous, faithful women. And so why should he lose that punishment? Why should he be punished for losing that inheritance? You see, those that were in the wilderness, they didn't receive land. But those who got faith in the wilderness will still receive an inheritance in heaven. And so when the believers come back to the earth, even though they didn't receive land because they were part of that old generation, those that were believers became believers in the wilderness or something, even after judgment, they still receive an inheritance in the millennial kingdom because they got right with the Lord. And so we understand that. And so their question is, hey, when we come back, those who are listed in this number that come in, they're going to be in charge of these certain locations. So why should our father not receive a thing? Because he was faithful what he had, but he just didn't have a son. So why shouldn't he receive this allotment? And so that was the case, and we'll get to that in a minute. And so their tribe gained in the wilderness. So it wasn't that everybody lost. Some lost and some gained. There was probably about 5 that lost and others that gained some, and some little, some much. And if you study that out, you'll see the differences. And you'll see that the wilderness is no excuse to do right for the Lord. To try to gain ground for the Lord, to try to prosper and to do and to teach people faithfully and to grow your inheritance, even when you say, hey, we don't have any promises, we're in the wilderness, we don't have victory. And people use the time of trial and tribulation and persecution of the church to say, well, that's why I couldn't save souls, that's why I couldn't receive an inheritance. But some, they doubled their inheritance through the time of persecution. Others, they over half shrunk their inheritance because they went through persecution. See, some will thrive, some will suffer through persecution, but it shouldn't be an excuse. We should serve the Lord whether in prosperity or in persecution. And so when we're counted, and some of us, obviously the old generation had a choice, but this new generation didn't have a choice going into the wilderness. Some of us will have a choice in whether we're faithful now or because of our unfaithfulness get a lot of trials later on. But depending on what stage of life and trials we're having, whether in great bounty or great suffering, even, for example, Joseph in Egypt, when he was a prisoner, he did well before the Lord and prospered, and in spite of his persecutions every single time. But yet the 7 years of plenty, he stored up. He prepared for the 7 years of famine, so that nation, he was able to prosper even in a time of famine. Even in a time when his whole family was suffering, he was prospering Egypt because he had prepared in the times of bounty. And so, depending on what we do with the situation that we're in, if you're born in the time of prosperity, store up, prepare, get ready to go so that you can have an inheritance when Christ returns. If you're born in a time of wilderness journeys and wandering, take what you've been given and use it to grow bountifully for the Lord. Because in each situation, maybe the circumstances are different, but you still have an opportunity, whether in wilderness or in prosperity, before or after you enter into a promised inheritance, you still have the opportunity to get an inheritance. And that's what the message is here, whether you gained or lost or whatever. We don't want to spend too much time on this, but we understand that we all shall have, many shall receive an inheritance. It also came out, the first verse here in chapter 26, it came to pass after the plague that the Lord spake unto Moses and to Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest, saying, and then verse 4b it says, as the Lord commanded Moses and the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt. And so, notice this, that even though they're two different generations, they're the same Israel. They're just different generations. I think that's quite interesting. And so, sometimes, but then also, in addition to that, you have verse 63. These are they that are numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who numbered the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan near Jericho. You have that whole list, and it talks about inheriting the land and all this stuff. And he says, but among these was not a man of them whom Moses and Aaron the priest numbered when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness in Numbers chapter 1. So even though that first generation, because of unbelief, could not enter in, you still have the same name. You still have the same Israel. Israel still went into the land, even though that generation did not. And so in this, we also see that in wilderness time, even in times of unbelief and faithlessness, that God remained faithful to keep His promise. To keep His promise of that covenant. Is that you can make the case, oh yeah, that first generation, that generation of unbelief, that old generation, did not keep their promise. They broke the covenant of God. But yet God, through their children, brought forth his promises. Even though they broke their promises, he still fulfilled his promises. So that when we're counted among Israel, even though we understand that those people that are all around us, and then also I want to add in this part here, I want to add in a verse 65 there at the end. And there was not left a man of them save Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. So even if in your generation God's made a judgment, says, hey, you guys of unbelief, you guys have failed me, you've broken my covenant, there was still a remnant that went through, the remnant of faith. So we understand that even if our church, if our group of people are faithless, God is still faithful. God will still bring us through. Even if it's not with our generation, He will bring it through the next generation if we continue in faith. And then some of us, not even Moses got through this, but if some of us stay faithful like Caleb and Joshua, then we can go through the persecution and prosper onto the other side. And so in other words, even if your generation is unfaithful, and they lose ground for the Lord, and they never enter into the promises that God gave to them, does not give you an excuse to say, well, this is a time of persecution, I can't do anything good for the Lord. No, they said, hey, we're going to endure this persecution, and we're going to stay faithful, and we're going to continue on. And so we need to understand that no matter what the church looks like today, or the Christians around us look like and act like, we can realize that there is an inheritance for us, and we can be counted in that generation that will inherit an inheritance with the Lord. And so the first group, in this counting, in this numbering of the children of the new generation, we see that there's also, in addition to gaining an inheritance, losing an inheritance, people that are faithful, even if they're ladies, not without sons, they receive inheritance because of their faithfulness. And so whether or not you're a man or a woman, you can still receive an inheritance from the Lord, whether or not you have the proper authority structure upon your family, you can still be faithful for the Lord. And then in addition to that, we have the people that will inherit a land, but then we also have the Levites who were not numbered among the children of Israel. So you have a first group that's going to inherit the land, and you have another group that will be servants of the Lord, ministry, not receiving an inheritance, not receiving a land, but they will receive a position. They will receive an office. They will receive an authority and a place to rule with the Lord. The apostles, they said that they were going to receive thrones. Their inheritance was not necessarily a land, but a position of authority over a land. And so there will be people that will need to work the land. They need to propagate, kind of like those plants did, is that they grew up in good ground. They made sure that the dirt was right, and they grew their plants in good ground. They prospered their field and so forth. And so they got a large inheritance of land. Others, they receive an office, and a place of position, a place of authority to manage and to operate and to feed. The Levites, their job was to feed, basically to manage, to organize, to make sure that everything was going properly, to make sure that you had the tools you needed to get the dirt out of your life, or not the dirt, but the rocks and the weeds and all those things. That the Levite was there, just like the pastors are today, the under-shepherds are today, to help get those rocks and weeds out of your life. See, it's the job of the dirt and the seed to grow a plant, right? It's the job of that plant to bring forth much fruit and to propagate itself. But it's the job of the officers, the job of the people that oversee the flock to make sure that there is safety, to make sure that they have a prosperous plot of land to propagate in, to make sure that the rocks in their life are gone. So while you're living life as a Christian, you have people in the church that are there to help you live a proper life, to live a better life, to know what the Lord says for you to do, to manage you, to make sure that you're doing things. So you'll have people in the generation of Jesus Christ in the church and in belief in faithful people that will one day receive an inheritance, you will have people that are not in church ministry necessarily, but they live their life in a community. They're regular Christians, regular people in society. They're going and going to work, and they got a skill, they got a craft, and they are serving the Lord in their own community as they raise their family, teach their kids to love the Lord, and just living a general life, but they're not in ministry. They're not full-time ministry. They're not in office. They're not going about teaching classes necessarily or so forth. Some of them will, lay preachers and teachers and things that do things in the local church that participate, volunteer in the local church. That's part of it. But there are people, for example, the average Christian, not everybody is going to be in full-time Christian ministry. That's just not the way life works. There will be people that are in the pews, they tithe, they give to the Lord, they work the land, if you will. And so your inheritance is of the land, is what you do in your Christian life to raise your family properly, to support the local church, to win souls to Christ, and to live a godly life. Those things will prosper and cause you to get a great inheritance in the coming kingdom. Those who are not given a land, like a full-time Christian pastor is, while it's popular to be bivocational, to support yourself and so forth like that, the best ideal way, of course, shown in the Old Testament, is that the people that are working the land give their tithe so that the officers can be given to full-time Christian ministry. And so when you're in full-time Christian ministry, you can feed the flock a lot better, and you can give the people that are busy working day-to-day lives and raising their family, you can give them the tools to prosper and pull out those weeds and those rocks. It'd be kind of like, for example, maybe God gave you a piece of land, or that you inherit a piece of land, and you say, oh, this is a wonderful place, but there's this giant boulder right in the middle there, and then you go with a bunch of your other landowners, your other ranchers, and say, hey, we need to all pull together, and we need to get somebody who knows how to build a rock cooler or whatever. So you pull your money together, you build, you get a company together called, Caterpillar or something like that, and then you start getting people together that know how to pull rocks out of your land, how to excavate your land, and to do those things to make your land good. So if your inheritance is full of rocky ground, I can't grow anything here, no field here. No, as a farmer, you say, hey, I'm going to go to the local Caterpillar guy or one of my fellow ranchers who has the tools needed to get rid of this rock and to cut it down. And now I go, hey, there's a bunch of weeds over there that are keeping my crop from growing. How can I? What are the tools that I can need? Oh, fire or pesticides, or what can I do to get rid of this invasive species that is not healthy for my crop? And then you'll go to the person who has that skill, that ability. Now that person or has that skill or ability does not necessarily own your land. It's like, I own your land because I helped you move a rock. And no, that's ridiculous. But the average farmer would go to these people with the skills, the ability to help them improve their land, and then to do that. And so that's what the Levites were to do for them spiritually, informationally, intellectually. You work in the land, you're doing the things that God has commanded you to do, and you're doing what is right. And then the Lord also has a group of people that will be counted among his officers to teach you how to improve that land, how to do right by that land, how to do the things that ultimately the land belongs to God, but you're the one who works it, you're the one who inherits it. Because remember that first stewardship of God was that once he finished the land and made the garden and prepared it, he put Adam there to dress and to keep it, and that was his command. And so ultimately, in the millennial kingdom, there will be a lot of people that will receive inheritance of land. They're supposed to dress and keep it. They're supposed to do what's right by it. But then there will be other officers come by to make sure it's managed properly, to make sure the vineyard is kept properly. And so this is similar to where when God made the vineyard and grew the vine, and you would be the vine that's supposed to be propagating, but then your vineyard keepers would be making sure it's managed properly for the Lord. In those parables, of course, the vineyard keeper wasn't doing everything properly. The Lord came and said, hey, how's my vine doing? And it wasn't doing very well. And so he got rid of those leaders. And so there will be, in the Lord's inheritance, in this new generation, there will be people that are supposed to be regular land workers, saving souls, raising children, making sure that their society, their nation, is following after the Lord. And then there will be officers, the church officers, that are supposed to be there to teach you to work and to prosper, to keep you safe. The shepherd would lead the sheep and make sure that the dangers that the sheep couldn't handle were away from the sheep. So they would deal with those bigger problems, those needing greater spiritual help. And so there will be people that will not receive a land, but they'll receive an office. They'll receive a authority, a management position for the Lord. And so those are, in this passage, the Levites. Those were there. So we need to understand that there will be some people that will be called to full-time Christian ministry. There will be other people that will be called to just be regular Christians in the pews, supporting their family and nation locally, making sure that righteousness and justice occurs through their society, and then also supporting the spiritual growth of their nation through the support of the local church. And their officers, making sure that their officers of the local church are available to do to their fullest ability the work of the Lord to help each individual. And so that's where, in this county of the new generation, they had both people that worked the land and both people that worked for the Lord. And so moving on, though, you have in verse 62, they were not numbered among the children of Israel. So they're not going to war, but they still receive an inheritance. They're not going necessarily working the land necessarily, but they are working the people. They are improving the people, giving them the tools that they need. And therefore, they receive an inheritance as well. Those people that are not necessarily, people always say, oh, you need to be a full-time worker while doing the ministry, and that's just a bunch of, you need to have full-time ministry and work towards that, because then you have the greatest ability to grow. Because there is no, verse 62b, because there was no inheritance given among the children of Israel, Numbers chapter 18 verse 20 gives the reason for them and what their inheritance was. Numbers chapter 18 verse 20, it says, and the Lord spake unto Aaron, thou shalt have no inheritance in their land, neither shalt thou have any part among them. I am thy part and thine inheritance among the children of Israel. See, we're focused on doing the things for the Lord to grow, the things that God wants us to grow. And so that's why it's important. So while, yes, the pastor, obviously to make sure that the gospel is not hindered, will be bivocational, we need to make sure that eventually our pastors and our deacons and whoever else is on staff at the local church get fully supported so that they can be fully given over to the Lord, so that they can build their inheritance through the gospel ministry. Those that live of the ministry, those that preach the gospel should live of the gospel, the Bible says. And so that would be the proper way. So even though we typically are bivocational starting out, we need to strive for that in our inheritance, when we come into the land, when we start a church, when we become members of a church, we need to strive for that so that they can have their inheritance in the Lord be to the fullest it can be. Neither must the children of Israel henceforth come nigh to the tabernacle of the congregation, lest they bear their sin and die. So they have an office, they have a purpose, they have a use. And so we should all work together in our given office. These were numbered in 63. These were numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priests, who numbered the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho. So they were numbered. They were counted among that generation, that new generation, and so therefore they received inheritance. It was based upon who went to war and who was involved in the gospel ministry that received an inheritance. And based upon that, if you prospered in your area through those two groups, that you would gain a greater inheritance. If you didn't prosper, you would get a lesser inheritance. And then in chapter 27, we see this story of the daughters of Zelophehad coming, and we kind of hit upon that as well, is the fact that even if you're not able to go to war, and even if you're not an officer in the church, and you are a lady and a person who is faithful among God's people, and you are serving, raising your family. The Bible talks about being keepers at home, raising the family from within, being that Proverbs 31 lady, is that you will also receive an inheritance among the people of the Lord. And so you may not always be able to be going out, oh, I'm that great soul winner for the Lord, I'm that great this, I'm that great minister, I'm standing before thousands and doing this great ministry, or that great ministry, or this great ministry. And you may just be raising your kids at home. You just may be raising a household. You may not be doing something in society. You're not going down to the community center. You're not going over to the government offices and saying, stop the abortion and all this stuff. You know, you're not necessarily out in society, but you're building your house from within, supporting it, so we understand that those people that are faithful from within, even the ladies who don't necessarily have authority in this structure here, it was the men who were able and prepared to go to battle that received the inheritance. But we show here in this passage that the Lord says, those who stand by the stuff, if you will. You know, David talked about this as well. Those that stand by the stuff, those that support you in your work. Men, you're the ones who are supposed to lead. You're the ones who are supposed to get there. But don't neglect your wives, your families, those people that are supporting you. You know, when the father has a property, has a land, and you know he goes to the church for the big equipment, the big expenses, but for the day-to-day work, who do you go to? You go to your kids. You teach them. You train them. You raise them. Show them, hey, one day you're going to have this inheritance. You're going to receive this because I'm going to pass away. I'm not going to be here, and you're going to work this land. You're going to support them. And so you need to train them, to raise them up, because they will inherit with you. They will be with you. You know, the body of Christ, you know, being that picture of the wife and so forth, the Lord inherits a kingdom, and we inherit with him, set in heavenly places with him. And so just as that, the ladies as well, is that as you are faithful within your household, you will receive an inheritance as well. And so that's kind of the picture showing here. And of course, you know, there's other aspects of this, and we'll get in Deuteronomy. It talks a little bit more about how that the ladies, even though they received an inheritance, they had to marry only within their tribe and so forth. And we'll talk about that another time. But gleaning this spiritual aspect into the new generation of Jesus Christ, we need to understand that there are people that are not necessarily out in the community, are not necessarily giant soul winners, or doing a lot of the vine work and propagating the gospel and doing all these things. But they are at home. They are supporting you. They're making sure the dinner's on the table. They're making sure that maybe they're not able to do certain things that you're able to do, but they're supporting you. Making sure that you're able to prosper the best you can. So you have prosperity from within, and you have prosperity from without, so that you can have the best field possible. And those things, when they are to their fullest, when you sustain and support your family, and then you make sure that the church is supported as people who are inheritors in the land, then you will have the greatest ability to receive the greatest inheritance. And so, basically, the people that receive the land that are prepared themselves to go out to battle, if you support those, if you would say the left flank, the right flank, you know, the house and the church, if you support those things, then your inheritance with the Lord will be the greatest it can be. Because you need to be able to have many hands to go spread the gospel, and you need to have many hands to clear out the rocks and the weeds from your life so that you can have the greatest harvest. But if you neglect your household, then you won't be able to get outside to work. If you neglect the church, you're not going to be able to remove those big rocks. You're not going to be able to remove and help and prosper and get a bountiful harvest. And so then you won't be prepared for the next year or the next winter. And so all three of these working together will bring forth a great bountiful harvest. And so that's why God says that those that in the time of wilderness, those that before the kingdom comes, now this is what our life is today, it's the time of wilderness before God's kingdom comes to this earth, we receive an eternal inheritance. He's looking to see in your life, what are you doing? What are you doing in your time of wilderness wandering? Are you going to use that time of your life as an excuse to say, well, you know, the church is being persecuted, Christians are being tormented in the land, and we just can't propagate the gospel anymore. It's just not working out. We can't buy and sell in the marketplace, and there's this great big conspiracy. Our government's not working. This is not working. And you're just sitting around complaining, saying there's a lion in the streets. You're not going to get an inheritance in the new generation. You'll be put under another brother, and so forth. And so we need to understand that these three need to work together to bring forth a bountiful harvest, to bring forth a great inheritance. And so all three of these working together in Israel were able to enter into the land and receive an inheritance together because they all worked together. The house, the leaders, and the feeders, the Levites. And then they were numbered among them. And so we see that in the numbering of the generation, there are many different offices and roles. And if you prosper and you work in supporting the other groups and supporting your given role, then you'll receive an inheritance. You may not be in full-time Christian ministry. That doesn't mean that you are lesser of an inheritor with Christ than the other 2-3 groups. And you may not be a landowner. Like me as a pastor, I should be focusing on the spiritual life of the people in the community, in the flock, and in society. I should not be focused on how am I going to build a network for a business and finances and all those things like that. That is the average Christian in the pew. That is their job. That is their land inheritance. And so we need to understand that given wherever our calling is, we need to do it to the best of our ability, supporting the other groups, and not think of ourselves as lesser than anything else. A big phrase oftentimes used when we went to Harlem, I don't know if they still use it, maybe they're the sub-cream, but they all say, you guys are the cream of the crop. You're the best. You're the most awesome. You're the greatest. And let's name everything after the greatest of these and receive it. That's just kind of the attitude there, the heartless spirit, whatever, that sweet spirit we have. Let's not lose that. And it just kind of, I don't want to get too much into that. But we, did you cough there? So we understand that, I forgot where I was going with that one, but so we need to understand that if we are, society tries to flip and make things perverse. If you're a mother, if you're a wife, you have the best of the best. You are the cream of the crop. You're raising your children properly. You're doing the best in your society. Not just because you're a preacher to thousands, you're the next Billy Graham or you're the next Benny Hinn or whatever weird cultic person you want to talk about. You are before thousands and therefore you get the greatest. No, you are in your land, raising your family, doing it with peace and you need to understand that your role that God has given to you is if you do that to the best of your ability, that's where you'll get your greatest and best inheritance, to prosper the greatest. So oftentimes people are looking to see where the grass is greener on the other side. We shouldn't be doing that. We should say, where has God placed me? Does He want me to be in the pew tithing and raising my family and going soul winning and doing what I can in my day-to-day interactions, talking to people about Christ, talking about and then talking in my society about the government being more righteous and having correct justice and trying to improve and be salt and light in my world? Or is it that God wants me to give up all those things and to live in the gospel ministry full time so that I can prosper and get rid of those big rocks and because I have a certain expertise and so forth to be able to do that to help improve the lives of many people that way. So where does God want you to be? Where does God want you to inherit it? And then do it to the best of your ability. Realize that if you are, whether you're a lady in a household, build that household to the best of your ability to get the greatest inheritance. If you are in the pew raising your families and supporting the church and being that landowner, prospering and being salt and light in the land, do that to the best of your ability. That is you being the cream of the crop. That is you being the best. If you are called to be a leader of the Lord, feed the flock of God, which God has made you overseers. Do the best you can in that area. That's your inheritance. That's your growth. be best you can in the local church. Don't be seeking some great grand stage somewhere and talking to a bunch of people and thinking public speaking somehow makes you get a greater inheritance than the local quiet pastor that does his job before the Lord faithfully. Because just because you talk to a bunch of people and say, well, I don't know if they got saved, see, God doesn't count how many seeds you talk to, He counts how many seeds you plant. So we need to understand that. And so the ladies received an inheritance well, even though they were not able to go forth to battle. The Levites received an inheritance, not of land, but they were able to receive an inheritance even though they don't go forth to battle. They support. Because if you look at this, it was the land owner, the land worker, who was the cream of the crop. See, it's not the pastor that's the cream of the crop. Not the guy who goes off to Bible college. Not the guy who does all those things. Not necessarily the person who's building the house from within. The cream of the crop is the guy who's sitting in the pews faithfully supporting his family and supporting the church and making sure that they have the greatest ability to do their work. And you're given inheritance, that's where you need to be. And don't think one is greater than the other, because they all work in tandem to bring glory to God. It is His crop, it is His field, it is His vineyard. If we don't work together and try to get everybody to become a minister, or get everybody to be just a person in the pew, or get everybody to just build their houses from within and not even worry about society, then we're going to destroy this world that God has made us overseers. That is the first stewardship position mankind has been given, and we as Christians should use these three areas to build it to the greatest of our abilities. And so in this passage we learn about the ladies. They also receive an inheritance. So you got these three areas: the household, the land workers, and then the ministers. And then finally you have the leader. Jesus Christ is of the new generation is Jesus Christ. And in this generation, it says here in this passage, in chapter Numbers 27. Let's go verse 17. Let's go with verse 15. Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, let's go ahead and go to 13. And when thou hast seen it, thou also shalt be gathered unto their people. Aaron thy brother was gathered. So basically, let's go to 12. And the Lord said unto Moses, get thee up into the Mount Aram, and to see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And when thou hast seen it, thou also shalt be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother was gathered. And so he's the last of his generation. He gets to see it, but he doesn't get to enter into it. But he was faithful and prepared the next generation. For ye rebelled against my commandment in the desert of Zin, in the strife of the congregation, to sanctify me at the water before their eyes. That is the water of Meribah and Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. So the leader of this old generation was faithful, but he rebelled in that area, and so therefore lost his inheritance in the land. You see, this kind of picture of Israel, how that they were faithful up until the time of Christ, and then when Christ was ready to lead them and to sanctify them, the leaders of Israel rebelled, and therefore, even though they saw Christ, they didn't get to enter into Him. They didn't get to enter into the New Testament because they rebelled at the cross of Christ. And so that's another message in of itself. But we need to. But that's the end of the old generation. Moving on to the New Testament in this picture. And so Joseph is a picture of Christ leading the church into the promised land. And Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, his desire, even though he did wrong, his desire was, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. And so we need to understand, of course, the church in the wilderness, that old generation, transition to the new generation, is a picture of the church going from the Old Testament to the New Testament, going from a Melchizedek and Levites and Israel, and then transitioning to Christ and the church and so forth, and that we are following after Christ now. He is our new leader. Rather than people of the Old Testament following after the kings of Israel and that lineage and the Levites and all this stuff, in the New Testament we transcend over to Jesus Christ and follow Him as our shepherd, and then our pastors as our under shepherd. And so this picture of the church of the Old Testament and the church of the New Testament transitioning over, and also in this transition, we not only have whole household people that build up the household, the wives and the daughters and the children and raising up, and then we also have the land workers, and we also have the church ministers. We also have the chief shepherd, Jesus Christ. And so we need to understand this new generation, it doesn't matter what you do in your given field. It doesn't matter what house you build. It doesn't matter where you're ministering at. If you're not doing it for the glory of God, you're not doing it properly. You're not going to be able to inherit the land. You won't be able to go over to that inheritance, because it's not about you doing the best that you can with what you got. It's about who you're doing it for. You see, these positions support each other, but if they're supporting themselves to the best of their ability and they're doing the greatest they can, but they're not following the Lord, it doesn't matter how many good deeds they do. If a church doesn't follow the Lord, it's not of value. It doesn't prosper anything. It doesn't do anything. And they need to follow their chief shepherd. Of course, we know, time's getting away from us, but we understand that the pastor is the under shepherd and the Lord is the chief shepherd. In John chapter 10, verse 11, it says, "I am the good shepherd, the good shepherd giveth his life for his sheep." He protects them. He makes sure that they have what they need. That's where all life flows from. And of course, this transition that we're talking about, let's go ahead and read Micah chapter 5, verse 2 through 4. It says, talking about this transition of the church from the Old Testament to the New Testament, which this was a picture of the old generation to the new generation. It's a picture of the Old Testament to the New Testament. He says in verse 2 of chapter 5 of Micah, it says, "But thou, Bethlehem of Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth hath been of old and of everlasting." Of course, we know that they rejected the prince and the chief, and so therefore they weren't able to enter in, and the church went on without them. Therefore will he give them up. He will give them up until the time that she which travaileth, and that's of course in Revelation, the travail with child and so forth, that picture is brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. They'll be brought back in after the seals are broken and so forth. They will be brought back in along with the church and so forth later on. But it shows that shepherd is going to lead the church until they come back as a nation. And let's go on over to let's go to Acts chapter 20, verse 28. Giving this picture of the leadership. Remember, we need to all work together, but we also need to do it according to our leadership, being directed by our leadership. All three of these groups need to follow after the Lord and their pastors. So if you have a ministry, a full-time Christian ministry, but you don't have the authority of a pastor over you, you're not a good ministry. You're not a proper ministry. All ministries need to be under the authority of the local pastor, the local church. And we have so many extra, external ministries that are secular ministry. They call themselves Christian ministries, but they have no church authority. And so those people are not underneath the proper leadership. And so they need to, I'm not going to go too much into that. Acts chapter 20, verse 28. It says, "Take heed therefore unto yourselves to the flock over which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers, to feed the church of God." This is the leaders, the under-shepherds, the Levites, if you will, to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood. And so we need to understand it belongs to the Lord. It's his church, and we are under-shepherds, feeding him, doing it under his leadership. And 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2. It says, "Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock." So we're supposed to help with those big rocks, be the best example. That's why there's not qualifications necessarily for a local church member, except to keep yourself unspotted from the world. But there are no other qualifications other than to keep your flesh clean. It is but for the pastors to be examples, so the best you can be. That's why those qualifications are there, and the pastors that you appoint should be keeping that example as best as they can. And then moving on to, of course, verse 4, it says, when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. So if you're faithful in your given position, when you enter into the land of the Lord, He will give you the reward of your inheritance, the reward of your endurance for the Lord. And so that is what we need to do. And so the shepherd is to lead them out and to bring them in, to make sure that they are the best they have their ability to. And so in every given field, we look at this list, we understand that there is several groups here. If you are a lady, if you are in a household, you're not out in the world, you're not in society trying to develop it and give righteousness and justice, you're not trying to be a part of the community. If you're just somebody building the household, being that Proverbs 31 and being those kids that are raising up, getting prepared to go to war, then you need to raise your family to do the best you can. To follow and to keep your household faithfully. If you are not in the ministry, but you are in society, in the world, working to raise your family properly and to do the best you can in the church, you need to work the land for God. You need to make sure that whatever you're doing in your skill, your trade, your positions, that you do it for the glory of God according to His leadership. Make sure that if you have an ability to affect the laws or society, that you do it for the Lord to bring forth His righteousness. And if you are in the ministry, you need to learn how to feed the people of God, make sure that they have the tools they need to affect society. And then if you are in an office, you need to lead the people of God to prosperity and to safety. Show them how that they can safely and properly do the things of God in society, not necessarily to do it to create sensations or to. You see a lot of people that they use the church as a platform to be very sensational, and then they say, oh, I'm being persecuted for the Lord, when in fact it's just them as an evildoer, as somebody who's not doing something properly, trying to garner flames for their own amusement, to be some sort of man of God, supposedly, when they are just trying to, like fake miracles and healings and stuff to bring a crowd, and so that they can bring money that doesn't necessarily bring glory to God. To dwell in peacefully in your society and in your proper role in God's generation. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you, bless you, and give us this word. I just pray that you'll help us to understand the importance of being the best we can be in our given role, in our given position in life. If we're not going to be in full-time Christian ministry, that we shouldn't prop that group up as better than anybody else, but rather that the person who is ministering faithfully, quietly in their household, and no further than that, trying to make their household the best it can be for the Lord, and then the person who is in his community, trying to be the best community individual he can be, and to go soul winning, to do those things, to be salt and light in his community, the best he can be, that these people doing these things quietly and faithfully are the cream of the crop, and also those local pastors that are not trying to gain sensationalism, not trying to have giant platform ministries that go all over the world and just become public speakers in the Christian arena, but don't really actually plant seeds and help their people. Lord, I pray that you'll help us understand that these are not the cream of the crop, but rather the faithful, quiet minister, the local pastor, is the cream of the crop. He's the supporter. He is the faithful one. And Lord, I pray that as we all together in your generation, as we propagate the gospel together, that the local church, which is the cream of your crop, the focal point of your crop, that we will together, all three groups, be the best we can be in your generation, so that when you come, you'll receive a great and grand inheritance from us, and say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. As we go our way, Lord, I pray that you'll keep us safe and to prosper us in all that we do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.